The sound of small sneakers echoed down the cold hallway of the shelter. Fluorescent lights flickered slightly overhead, casting pale shadows on the mint-green floor. Evie Langston, just 4 years old, walked with an unusual calm for someone her age. Dressed in denim overalls and a bright yellow t-shirt, she seemed untouched by the chaos around her. Behind her, Maeve and Colt followed cautiously as the barking of restless dogs ricocheted off the metal walls. But Evie didn't flinch. Her eyes were locked ahead, where a single kennel sat in complete silence. Inside, sitting partially in shadow, was Draven, a large German shepherd, his body still, his black eyes deep and unreadable. He didn't bark, didn't move. He simply watched. Janet, a staff member at the shelter, quickly approached. "Sweetheart, not that one," she said gently. "He's not up for adoption. He came from a bad situation. Dangerous." Her voice held the exhaustion of someone who had seen too much. But Evie didn't move. She knelt down in front of the gate, silent, staring directly into the dog's eyes like time had stopped. "He's not dangerous," Evie said softly, without a trace of doubt. Maeve reached out to lift her, but the child quietly stepped aside. Draven rose to his feet. His towering frame made Colt instinctively shift forward, protectively. But Draven didn't growl, didn't bare his teeth. He walked to the front of the kennel and lay down slowly, pressing his head against the gate. For the first time in weeks, he looked calm. Janet froze. In all her years working there, she had never seen him like this. Since his arrival, Draven had growled, snapped, and withdrawn from everyone. And now he was letting this tiny girl touch him without fear. "What's his name?" Evie asked. Janet hesitated. "Draven. But he doesn't respond to it. Never has." Evie whispered it, barely loud enough to hear. "Draven." And at that moment, the dog's tail twitched, just once, slowly. Janet covered her mouth in disbelief. "He was waiting for me," Evie said quietly, as if it were the most obvious truth in the world. In the surveillance room, Harlan Whitaker watched the scene unfold on the screen. His coffee sat untouched. His usually unreadable face tightened with recognition. "No way," he muttered. "That dog. He remembers." And down the hall, Draven's eyes remained locked on Evie. No longer lost, no longer hollow. For the first time in a long time, something inside him had come back to life. The ride home was quieter than usual. Evie sat in the back seat, her small hand resting on the collar in her lap, eyes fixed out the window as the world passed by. Maeve kept glancing at her through the rearview mirror, while Colt stared out the passenger window, jaw tight. Neither parent had spoken much since they signed the temporary foster agreement. The shelter had insisted it was only a trial period. "Strictly monitored," Janet had said, after handing Colt a thick manila envelope stamped with behavioral hold, Level 3 in red. Maeve finally broke the silence. "We didn't come for this, Colt. We were just supposed to look." Colt nodded slowly. "I know." He tapped the envelope on his knee. But Evie didn't even hesitate, and he didn't react like they said he would. "You saw it." Maeve sighed, both hands tight on the wheel. "I saw a 4-year-old fall in love with a dog marked dangerous. That's what I saw." Neither of them said what they were really thinking. That Evie had seen something no one else had, and they didn't understand it, but feared what it could mean. When they arrived home, Evie led Draven through the front door like she'd done it 100 times before. No hesitation, no fear. The dog moved quietly behind her, not tugging, not resisting. He stopped when she stopped, sat when she spoke. The house, usually filled with toddler chaos, now seemed unnaturally still. Draven didn't bark, didn't sniff wildly like most dogs. He simply observed, watchful, calculating. Colt found it both impressive and unsettling. Later that evening, after Evie was asleep, Colt opened the manila envelope. The room was dim, the only light coming from a small lamp beside the couch. Maeve sat next to him, arms crossed, already bracing for what they might find. The first page was a behavioral summary. Words like aggressive, territorial, reactive to loud sounds, and extreme distress in confinement were underlined in bold. There was a note from a previous foster who had returned Draven after just 2 days. Snapped at my teenage son when he reached too fast. Dog has serious trauma. Maeve looked at Colt. What are we doing? Her voice was low, almost a whisper. We brought that into our home with her. Colt didn't answer right away. He kept reading. Then he found a picture stapled to the last page. A black and white photo of Draven. Years younger, chained to a post, ribs showing, eyes haunted. On the back, owner under investigation, case pending. Colt stared at the image, brows furrowed. Whatever happened to him, it wasn't just bad, it was cruel. And somewhere down the hallway, Draven lay at the foot of Evie's bed, not asleep, just watching the door. The following morning, the house seemed to breathe differently. The usual rhythm of cereal bowls clinking, cartoons in the background, and Evie's endless chatter was replaced with a kind of stillness. Maeve stood in the kitchen, pouring coffee with one eye on the hallway. She hadn't slept well. Every creak in the floor, every distant breath from the other rooms had made her tense. Draven had not made a sound all night. No barking, no pacing. He had laid at Evie's door until morning, unmoving. Evie came skipping into the kitchen barefoot, her ponytails bouncing. "Can Draven eat pancakes?" she asked innocently, already dragging a plate from the cabinet. Maeve gave a forced smile. "No, sweetie. He needs special food. Remember what the lady at the shelter said?" Evie nodded, but her attention quickly returned to the dog, who now appeared at the entrance of the kitchen. He stopped at the threshold, his eyes locked on Maeve, not threatening, but intensely present, as if reading her. Colt entered from the garage, still in his uniform from the night shift. He paused when he saw Draven. "He hasn't moved from her side," Maeve said, barely above a whisper. "Like he's guarding her." Colt gave a small nod, then knelt down and slowly extended a hand. Draven didn't flinch. He sniffed it briefly, then sat. It wasn't trust, not yet, but it was a sign. Colt exhaled. He's different with her. Like he knows she's the only one who doesn't expect anything from him. Later that day, Maeve made a call to Nova Ellery, the shelter's head vet. Nova had handled Draven's intake, and Maeve needed more than what was in the folder. On the phone, Nova hesitated before speaking. "Draven's case is complicated. He didn't just survive abuse, he was trained. We believe his previous owner conditioned him to react to specific male voices, sudden movements. He's not naturally aggressive. He's confused." Maeve's grip on the phone tightened. "So we're housing a weapon that doesn't know it's safe yet?" "No," Nova said gently. "You're housing a soul that doesn't know what kindness feels like. But that little girl of yours, something about her grounded him. That's rare. Almost unheard of." That night, Maeve found Evie sitting in the hallway, her head resting on Draven's side as he laid calmly beside her. The dog's eyes were half closed, but not asleep. Still alert, still protecting. She sat on the stairs, watching them in silence. For the first time, she allowed herself to wonder, what if this wasn't a mistake? What if Evie hadn't chosen Draven at all? But Draven had chosen her. It had been 5 days since Draven came home, and the house had slowly begun to settle into a new rhythm. Colt started leaving the kennel open at night. Maeve, though still cautious, no longer tensed every time Draven entered the room. Evie, in her usual quiet brilliance, had taught the dog a new word each day. Wait, come, easy. He responded not with perfection, but with intention. Every command from her sounded like something familiar, as if Evie spoke a language he once knew but had forgotten. But something shifted that afternoon. Colt was in the garage when Draven suddenly froze by the back door. His ears shot up. His body stiffened, not like a dog about to play, but like one sensing danger. Maeve saw it too. Draven's stance wasn't just alert. It was protective. Car had parked across the street. A black SUV with tinted windows. No one got out. It sat there for several minutes before pulling away. Colt noted the license plate, just in case. That night, Maeve brought it up over dinner. You think it's connected to him? She asked, voice low. Could be, Colt replied. If someone's looking for him, or watching where he ended up, they wouldn't walk up to the door. Evie looked up from her plate. Draven didn't like that car. Her voice was so certain, so calm, that it made Maeve shiver. Colt decided to contact Draven Slade, an old friend who worked for the county's animal control and had access to deeper records. He sent him a scanned copy of Draven's intake papers. The response came hours later after midnight. Colt, that dog's got more redacted files than I've ever seen. His original owner's name was sealed under court order. The case never went to trial, witness disappeared. But get this, his chip was scanned 2 years ago in a dogfight raid out of state. Same dog, different name. Colt stared at the screen, stomach sinking. They used him, he whispered. They turned him into something he never wanted to be. In the hallway, Draven paced restlessly. Something in the air had changed, he could feel it. And in Evie's room, her sleep had turned fitful. She called out once in a dream. Draven pressed his body against the door, his breath shallow. By morning, Colt had installed cameras around the house. Maeve double-checked every lock. But nothing felt truly safe. Whatever Draven had been running from, whoever had made him what he was, it wasn't finished with him. And now, it wasn't just his life that was in danger. It was Evie's too. The rain hit hard that night. Sheets of water slashed against the windows, and the wind howled through the trees like something alive. Maeve double-checked the locks for the third time while Colt reviewed the security footage on his laptop, frame by frame. Nothing unusual, no movement, no signs of anyone returning. But Draven wouldn't rest. He paced the hallway like a soldier on duty, ears low, tail stiff, every muscle in his body coiled with unease. Evie, unfazed, curled up on the living room floor beside him, blanket over her shoulders and a book in hand. Why is he so nervous? Maeve whispered. Colt shook his head. It's like he's remembering something. As if on cue, Draven lifted his head, eyes locked on the front door. His entire frame trembled, not from fear, but recognition. And then, to their horror, he growled. Deep, low, a sound that made Colt freeze. He's never made that sound, Maeve said, barely audible. The doorbell rang. Not loud, just one press. Long, slow, like whoever stood outside wasn't in a hurry. Colt grabbed the bat from behind the coat rack and stepped forward. Maeve, take Evie to the back room. But Evie didn't move. She stood slowly, her tiny hand resting on Draven's head. He knows who it is, she whispered. Her voice didn't shake, but her eyes did, and Draven didn't bark. He just stood rigid, staring at the door, growling with every breath. Colt opened the door a crack, just enough to see. A man in his late 40s stood on the porch, leather jacket soaked, face hidden beneath a cap. No car in sight. The man didn't introduce himself. He simply said, I'm looking for a dog. German Shepherd. Answers to Reaper. Colt didn't respond. The name hit like a cold slap. You've got the wrong house, he said. The man smiled without warmth. I don't think so. Colt slammed the door shut and locked it again. Draven let out a sharp bark and turned in circles, agitated. Maeve was already dialing the police, but they both knew it would take time. And that man wasn't just passing through. He had found them, and he'd come for Draven. In the chaos, Evie remained still. Draven pressed himself against her as if anchoring her in place. And she, looking up at her parents, said something they wouldn't forget. He used to belong to that man, but he doesn't anymore. Draven chose me. The storm had passed by morning, but the air around the house still felt heavy, tense. Every creak in the floorboards, every movement beyond the curtains made Maeve's heart race. Colt hadn't slept. He sat at the dining table with a cup of cold coffee, watching the security footage again. The man never showed his face clearly, but his voice, Colt couldn't forget it. And more importantly, neither could Draven. The moment the man had spoken, something inside the dog had changed. Evie didn't speak much at breakfast. She quietly passed Draven small bites of toast under the table, her fingers brushing his fur with a calm only she seemed to carry. Colt turned toward her. "Sweetheart, how did you know that man used to own Draven?" She shrugged. "I didn't know. I just felt it." When he said that name, Reaper, Draven got sad. Not scared. Sad. Maeve exchanged a glance with Colt. It was more than a feeling. Evie had sensed something that went deeper than memory. Later that day, Colt got a call from Draven Slade. His voice was tight. "I pulled some strings. The man you saw last night, his name is Rhys Callahan. Ex-military. Dishonorably discharged. Moved state to state running illegal training rings. He had a reputation for turning rescue dogs into weapons. And Draven, well, back then he was known as Reaper. The most obedient, most dangerous one of them all." Colt felt the air leave his lungs. "And now he's here." Maeve listened quietly as Colt explained. "We have to tell the police he came to our door." Colt nodded. "Already did. But if this guy wants Draven back, he won't just stop." Maeve looked at Evie, who had fallen asleep on the couch with Draven's head resting on her lap. "He didn't just train Draven. He broke him. And now she's the only thing holding him together." That evening, Colt received an unmarked envelope in the mailbox. No stamp, no return address. Inside was a single photograph. It showed Draven, muzzled, chained to a steel post in a dark basement. The back of the photo read, in crooked handwriting, "He was mine before he was yours, and he'll be mine again." Colt stood motionless, staring at the image. When Maeve saw it, she covered her mouth. "He's not going to let go." And from the hallway, as if sensing the shift in their fear, Draven rose from the floor. Not with panic, but with purpose. He walked slowly to the front door and sat beside it. Watching, waiting, protecting. His past had found him. But this time he wasn't running. Not anymore. By the third night, no one in the Langston household was sleeping. Colt had installed extra deadbolts, reinforced the back door, and placed motion sensors by the fence line. Maeve kept her phone within arm's reach at all times, her eyes flicking toward the windows every few minutes. Draven hadn't left Evie's side, not once. He ate only when she reminded him. He slept only when she slept. And when she cried in her dreams, he placed his paw over her chest, as if to hold the fear down. Evie had stopped asking questions. She no longer drew pictures or played with her toys. Instead, she sat with Draven, whispering softly into his ear. No one knew what she was saying, but it calmed him. He no longer paced or barked. He watched, listened, waited. Maeve, sitting on the edge of the couch one evening, asked gently, "Evie, what do you say to him?" The little girl didn't look up. "I tell him he's not bad. I tell him it's okay to stop fighting now." That night, the cameras caught movement. 2:14 a.m. A shadow scaled the east fence, fast, practiced. Colt watched the footage in real time, heart pounding, then grabbed the pistol from the lockbox. Maeve moved to Evie's room, locking the door from the inside. Draven stood in the hallway, hackles raised, growling. Not out of confusion, but clarity. He remembered this. The way danger moved, the scent of leather, the sound of a boot scraping brick. Colt opened the front door silently and stepped onto the porch. Nothing. No wind. No movement. But then, glass shattered in the back of the house. Draven shot down the hallway like lightning. Colt turned, gun raised, shouting, "Stay inside." But the house was no longer silent. Inside there was chaos. In the kitchen, Rhys Callahan stood like a ghost pulled from nightmare. Wet boots, dark coat, wire cutter in hand. Draven came at him with full force, a silent blur of rage and precision. Rhys didn't panic, he expected it. He moved sideways, fast, grabbing a heavy object from the counter and swinging. The blow caught Draven in the ribs, sending him skidding across the tile. "You remember me," Rhys hissed. "You were mine. You obeyed me." Draven didn't stay down. He stood, slower this time, but eyes locked on the man. Evie's voice echoed from the hallway. "Draven, no." Not in fear, in command. He stopped. Rhys froze, confused. In that second, Colt appeared in the doorway, weapon aimed. "You've got 2 seconds to leave or you don't walk out." Reese smiled, thin, cruel. "You think the dog belongs to you?" He stepped back. "You have no idea what he's capable of." Reese didn't leave. Not really. He stepped back into the night, disappearing into the dark woods behind the house. But Colt knew he'd be back. The police arrived 20 minutes later, too late, as always. They took statements, walked the perimeter, and promised extra patrols. But none of that calmed the gnawing sense of dread that settled over the family like a fog. Reese had looked Colt in the eye with the confidence of a man who had done this before. He wasn't done. He'd barely begun. The next day, Draven Slade showed up unannounced with a sealed file in his hand. "This is off the books," he told Colt and Maeve. Inside were classified documents from Reese Callahan's military discharge, psychological reports, incident summaries. What stood out most was a single sentence, highlighted in yellow. Subject used advanced behavioral conditioning on canines. Subject referred to dog number 019 as an extension of himself. "Reaper will act when I cannot." Colt stared at the words like they were poison. He turned Draven into his weapon. But that's not who Draven was anymore. That evening, Evie sat cross-legged on the floor, gently brushing Draven's fur while the television hummed in the background. "He's scared, Mommy," she said softly. "Not of Reese, of himself. He doesn't trust what he'll do if Reese comes back." Maeve knelt beside her, brushing Evie's hair behind her ear. "But he listens to you," she whispered. Evie nodded. "Because I don't tell him what to do. I tell him who he is." Just past midnight, the power went out. The silence that followed was suffocating. Colt moved through the house with a flashlight, heart pounding. Outside, the motion lights were dead, the security feed offline. Draven stood in the hallway, body coiled, nose twitching. A low growl rumbled from his chest, and he turned. Not toward the door, but toward the back bedroom. That's where Reese came in. He broke the window quietly, his movements surgical, calculated. But Draven heard him. He charged, this time not as a weapon, but as a guardian. Reese wasn't ready for the force of that choice. The two collided in the narrow hallway, teeth bared, rage unleashed. Colt rushed in, yelling, but couldn't get a clear shot. Maeve pulled Evie into the closet, shielding her with her body, whispering prayers she hadn't said in years. And then, Evie screamed, "Draven, look at me." Draven froze mid-lunge, blood at his mouth, teeth inches from Reese's throat. His chest heaved, torn between instinct and something new. His eyes flicked to her, soft, pleading, true. In that split second, he made a choice. Not to kill, to protect. The house was silent, except for the distant sirens growing louder by the second. Reese lay on the floor, blood seeping from his temple, groaning but alive. Colt stood over him, pistol in hand, body trembling from adrenaline. Draven sat in the hallway, chest heaving, head low, not from exhaustion, but restraint. He could have ended it. Everyone knew that, but he hadn't. He had heard her. He had chosen. Maeve held Evie tightly in her arms, rocking gently back and forth in the closet. The little girl's face was buried against her shoulder, her fingers still gripping the fabric of her mother's shirt. When the police arrived, Colt opened the door wordlessly. They stormed in, secured Reese, and began questioning, but no one in that house had the energy for details. Draven remained exactly where he was, unmoving, waiting for someone to tell him what came next. Nova Ellery arrived an hour later, having heard everything over the scanner. She dropped to her knees beside Draven, tears in her eyes. "I never thought he could come back from what they did to him," she whispered. "But he didn't just come back. He fought it." She placed a hand gently on his head. "He's not Reaper anymore. He's Draven. And he proved it." Draven Slade appeared later that morning with an update. "Callahan's facing a long list of charges," he said, flipping through a file. "Breaking and entering, assault, illegal training operations. And thanks to Draven not delivering a fatal bite, there's no room for a counterclaim of excessive force." Colt leaned back in his chair, emotionally spent. He held back, he muttered. After everything that man did to him, he still held back. Maeve looked across the room at Draven, who now laid beside Evie, her tiny hand resting over his scarred ribs. Because she gave him back to himself, she said. She didn't see a threat. She saw what was left after the world tried to break him. Evie was already asleep, curled up beside her protector, her breathing slow and steady. And for the first time since he arrived in their lives, Draven closed his eyes, not because he was guarding someone, but because he felt safe. That afternoon, Animal Control formally lifted the behavioral hold on Draven. His file, once labeled with warnings and red flags, now read, reclassified, temperament stable, protective, loyal. But to Evie, none of that mattered. She looked at the officer and said, simply, "He's not a case. He's my best friend." And across the room, for the first time in years, Draven wagged his tail without fear. Weeks passed, but the memory of that night never really left. The broken glass had been replaced, the bruises had faded, and the house once again filled with morning cartoons and pancake smells. But something had changed, something deeper than routine. There was a peace now, a quiet understanding that what they all survived together had reshaped them in ways no one could fully put into words. Draven was no longer the shadow lurking in the hallway. He was family now. He greeted Colt at the door every evening, waited patiently beside Maeve during her coffee, and walked beside Evie like a soldier sworn to protect. But it wasn't duty that moved him anymore, it was love. Simple, earned, free. He had made his choice, and he reminded them every day in small, silent ways that he wasn't going anywhere. Evie too had changed. She still played and giggled and ran barefoot through the backyard, but there was something older in her eyes now. She understood things most children didn't, about fear, about loyalty, about being seen when no one else sees you. Sometimes Maeve would find her talking to Draven in whispers, not commands, conversations, as if they shared a language no one else could learn. And maybe they did. One Sunday afternoon, the family took a trip to a nearby field where dogs ran leash-free. Maeve hesitated at first, worried Draven might feel threatened or revert. But when Colt unclipped the leash, Draven didn't bolt. He walked to Evie's side and stood still, watching, waiting. Only when she nodded, soft and certain, did he run. Not from anything, but toward something, toward life. Other families watched, whispering. "Isn't that the dog from the news?" one asked. "That's him," another whispered. "The one who was trained to be violent." But what they saw wasn't violence. It was grace. Draven leaping across the grass, tail up, tongue out, free. A little girl running beside him, laughing, fearless. They didn't see a rescue case. They saw a miracle. That night, Evie fell asleep with her hand on Draven's back. As always, Colt and Maeve stood by the doorway watching quietly. "You think he knows he's home?" Maeve asked. Colt nodded. "I think he knew the moment she looked at him through that gate." Outside, the world kept spinning. But inside that house, a story had ended, and a new one had begun. Not about a dog who was too dangerous to adopt, but about a girl who saw through the damage into the soul beneath. And the dog who, when given a second chance, chose not to run but to stay.